Kia koutou, ngā mihi, Terry Nicholas aho. It was a very impressive kōrero just by James, and what I'm going to take you through also is about our whakapapa and DNA in Murihiku Regenerate. And it all started because of the closure, the signal closure of Tiwais. And the signal closure of Tiwais was going to not only introduce us with economic deprivation, but also the environment. We were concerned about the environment. We were concerned about the way that the negotiations were going. And we called the runanga together, and then we actually assembled all Crown agencies, regional councils, local bodies, the Mayor's Forum, and anybody else that was a construct underneath the Crown, and we advised them in October that we were actually activating our partnership as a treaty partner with the Crown. So that timeline started in October, and we actually done that. And that was met with probably miscomprehension from some of the attendees, and for some of us, we knew that Tiwais was actually going to erode our community of significance. And I'll explain it this way. When you look at Bluff, when I was growing up in the Bluff, it was a thriving industry. It had the freezing works. There was jobs all over the place. You could go down the waterfront. You could get a job on a trawler. You could get a job oyster opening down the cool stores, wool stores. You have a look at Bluff today. A lot of that's disappeared just by two industries. Probably the Ocean Beach freezing works was a significant one, and probably the meat loaders that disappeared from our port. And so most of that was actually going out of Port Chalmers. And then you go to Western Southland, you look at the sawmills, you go through to Tautau, you look at the sawmills and that industry again, you go out to Ōhai nightcaps, you come back around to Gore, you look at the closures of the paper mill, Cremota, also the freezing works actually went down to about 2 chains, beef chains. And so when you look at Tiwais and you look at the significance, what I've just explained of those closures, and you look at the Tiwais closure and you look at all the foreign exchange that goes out of here, where Tipene will actually talk about that, the GMP, we were actually going to be left in a little bit of devastation, because Tiwais is the highest paid, probably unskilled labour workforce that you'll get in New Zealand. And how I explain that is any one of us could roll up, get a job there and get a week's trial and then straight into huge salary. You tell me anywhere else in New Zealand that you can do that. It's already a set salary. You go through, you're not on a 90-day employment agreement or anything like that. You've just got an induction period and you're straight onto salary and you just move yourself up. So that was going to actually be difficult to probably reproduce in Southland. So we got together and we looked at it real hard, and it was a devastational issue. I can't talk too much about the environmental issues that we know that are on Tiwais, because we've just been negotiating with Sean over there from MFE. And also Treasury. So all the way through, we built up a good relationship with Treasury, where we actually had an advisory panel actually advising Treasury through the negotiations, which was with Tipene, David Stock, a commercial lawyer in Christchurch, Mike Puyol, our CE of Tahu Holdings, and who else was on it? Tipene, I just forget now, but I think there was one other. Mike Shepard. So we're revising the Treasury and the preliminary discussions with Tiwais, and we got there to a point where we know Tiwai has actually got a 3 to 4 year reprieve. And so we can't take our foot off the throttle, we've got to be right onto it. So Murihiku regeneration, part of a Ngāi Tahu construct, also part of the Papatipi Runanga, and we work on 4 values: economic, social, cultural and environmental. So they're our 4 key objectives. And also Tiwai is in a statutory acknowledged area, which Te Runanga and Ngāi Tahu have got the relationship with the Crown, not the Papatipi Runanga. So we've got to be seen to actually be upholding the mana of the hapus. Otherwise, we could actually, Te Runanga and Ngāi Tahu could come over top of us and take that responsibility of us to protect those statutory rights for people that are absent that actually participate with us. I'll let Tipene talk a little bit about the GNP and the foreign exchange, and you'll understand the significance and the importance of why we've actually reacted, Murihiku regeneration.
Tēnā tātou te whare. The major issue is the obvious thing. I'm sorry. There's been a reprieve on Tiwai in terms of close down. The great danger of that is that the anxieties about it will go off the boil. There'll be an election before that period's out. There'll be the foot will go off the accelerator in developing a response. And we have been arguing, and I've been emphasising, while Michael's done an extraordinary job in extracting all the archaeological and sort of heritage reference on the site out there, and Terry's been up to his eyeballs with the whole process of the Murihiku regeneration. It has always been, to my mind, an issue, but unless we think about this whole energy thing as an opportunity to reset, we're missing an opportunity which will come probably not in most of your lifetimes again. It's the first time we've had such an opportunity to rethink the basic model in my lifetime. And I'm in my 82nd year, and I can well recall the arguments and the debates about the establishment of mana Pauri and the establishment of Tiwai. And in fact, I can remember being, when I was getting all excited about the modification of mana Pauri and indignant about it, how my father, who was at the time the Vice President of the Forest and Bird Protection Society, told me I was talking rubbish and explained to me the basics of fundamental national economics. Now, even though that argument that he put to me is now a bit dated and the world has moved on, as has he, and I could be described as being in the waiting room, the point that I'm wanting to get to you is that over time the fundamentals have not really changed. A few years ago, Murihiku, Southland, with 3% of the population, was producing something of the order of 27% of New Zealand's GNP. Now, GNP is what we live off. GDP is a thing invented only in the Second World War to explain to Roosevelt how he can afford to fight both the Americans, the Europeans and the Japanese on the same, Germans and the Japanese at the same time, and convince him about the United States' participation in the Second World War. GDP is a recent economic fiction evolved. It measures the rate at which things get chucked around on the internal washing machine. And you get your taxes are all based on that. But your GNP is the surplus we export to make our income as a nation. And the Tiwai, the Manapori power scheme, an integral element of that business of generating electricity on a renewable basis to melt Queensland alumina, turn it into the highest quality aluminium in the world and export it, for which we receive a disproportionate contribution to our GNP. Now, there's all sorts of other games at stake here. There's basically a national racket, which is called the electricity distribution system, in which you are exploited, in my view, quite shamefully, by a model which extorts money from you in dry years in order to enhance the profits payable to the principal shareholder, who is the Minister of Finance. And you sit around getting angry with the power companies. They're just behaving like the little greedy puppies they were invented to be. Now, what we are in the position at the moment of being is, on a number of fronts, having a major national reset of how we handle electricity. It is an opportunity which will come once, 2 or 3 generations. We developed this hydro electricity generation some years ago, back in, well before I was born. We have a remarkable purity in terms of emissions by comparison. I know all the usual stuff in the newspapers about how wicked we are, but breast-beating is a sort of colonialist victims thing. We are extraordinary in our generation, our cleanliness, renewability and sustainability of our electricity. We need to do more of it instead of wasting any more of our high quality water the way we do. We need to store capacity and generate more. Why should we generate more, and why should we do it this way? Is so we can decarbonise more effectively. Talking about decarbonising the New Zealand economy without actually generating greater electricity production at a lower cost is nuts. And it's completely available if the state has the courage to use its present political advantage to go in that direction. Now, I wouldn't like you to think I was being too gentle and revealing my thinking to you, but the real point is you can't have a situation where we send the surplus generation created by the closure of Tiwai, and it will close on aluminium. You can't send that into the great washing machine of GDP in Auckland at an economic basis because of the capacity of the loss. We've brought the loss down by 15%, but we're not going to get any lower. We're now losing, every kilowatt of electricity we send to north of Lake Taupo, it costs us about 15% of its value in transmission loss. We're completely wired up from Manapari to a deep water port here. The whole structure's in place. The only thing you've got to lose is your chimney. Now, why do I say that? Because the answer is very clearly in green hydrogen. We could convert the whole of the national heavy freight fleet by that. Trains, heavy trucks, the Richardson Group is prepared to convert as soon as it's available. That's the biggest owner of heavy freight in the country. The trains, ships, the lot, to a port which is going to be up to 2, certainly 1 and up to 2 metres deeper as a deep water port by the turn of the century. You've got a site which is a process which is non-pollutant. You've got converting to compressed hydrogen. As far as I understand it, there is no way you can really do cars very effectively that way, but heavy vehicles and heavy transport, yes. The logic of doing this is actually a no-brainer, but we need more Lake Onslows and more utilisation of our stored water, which we currently waste and throw away, to achieve that. We've got to think nationally for the benefit of this local world in Murihiku. If we don't, we're just going to be another little parochial swamp on the tail of the nation. But if we can think about how this whole thing goes that way towards green hydrogen, we produce that, the way the arrangements we set up for it, we've got time to design it, but we haven't got that much time in a mere 3 years or 4 years to goodbye. So I'm urging that we start thinking as citizens of the New Zealand nation and saying, how can we make a contribution to the whole? If all we're going to do is worry about protecting some jobs and cleaning up the Tiwai beach, well, that's a useful thing to do, but it's not something I need to spend any more of what time I've got left before they turn the lights out bothering about it. Now, I know this. What does this mean for Ngāi Tahu? Well, our view as upoko is there's all sorts of heritage things to protect, there's all sorts of work to do, but ultimately the Murihiku upoko are saying we can only do this with te runanga o Ngāi Tahu, cooperation and participation. We do believe that there's a commercial opportunity lying in here somewhere. We haven't been really talking about that so far to any great depth. Meridian's clearly going to be a part of it. The Crown's going to be a part of it. But if we can't think as a people about how we want Aotearoa New Zealand to be, we actually have got no basis for saying how we ourselves as a tribal nation want to be part of it. If you want to be, all the indications are that people say they want to be in a tribal nation. Now, I must admit, I get a bit cynical about that at times, but that's family matters. The more wider pictures, if someone says, why do you want to be an iwi nation within the context of Aotearoa New Zealand? You need to be able to say, we want a New Zealand that looks like this. And that's the world we want to be a part of. And we have to be, as a people, a part of the conversation which decides and starts to dream about how we want to be. But we do not have many opportunities to convert this nation to genuinely sustainable, clean, fairly priced energy, and to totally reset the model. There's some brilliant innovation and invention occurring in New Zealand at the moment. It's very difficult to get it into the conversation. So that's why I'm causing a bit of a nuisance, bothering poor old Dean, because he's got to go and talk to the mayors, and all they're worried about is their idea of the future's after lunch sometime next Wednesday. And he's got to deal with them. They get worried about what I'm saying, and Terry says I'm a good bloke, and Michael seems to be more decided than he has been. But we are moving it. We are moving the discussion, and we are getting some measure of political response. Now, that's the territory we're in, because this change that we're talking about, the transformation of that peninsula over there, the transformation of the idea of renewable, sustainable hydrogen is huge. And it goes way beyond the usual mandate of an upoko, of one of 18 upoko or 3 or 4 upoko stuck in southern Ngāi. But if we don't think about it, all I've got to do is learn how to play golf. And if we don't do something useful about it, I'm wasting what time I've got left. And the same can be said for my mates. And so that's why the upoko of Murihiku are concerned with that. In the first instance, there's jobs, there's retraining, there's all sorts of things and policies for the young, which Terry's leading. And I have to say, I have nothing but admiration for that. And that retraining, reshaping of our population for a time when the world can be reset and Murihiku o Tiwai Pounamu can restore itself from the present difficulties. This is an opportunity that was not going to come again in a rush. There is a warehouse in Greytown in the Wairarapa. It is full of 44-gallon drums, all stacked, beautifully painted. They're in 4 different colours. The predominant colour in that warehouse is blue. And that all comes, it's all being processed, it's all manuka honey, it's all aging at the moment. As you know, the extractor is the equivalent of the winemaker in the vineyard, right? All getting on for 3/4 of all of those stacked up drums. I've got a photo on my phone of it. Comes from one beekeeper in Southland. And it's all being processed carefully for market. Now, it's not, the proportions are not always as big as I've just referred to. But we can do clever stuff here if we've got a mind to. We can do things differently here if we've got a mind to. But most of all, we as a nation have an opportunity. And while the rest of them aren't thinking about it, there's no reason why we shouldn't think about it. Tēnā tātou.